Hi everyone, FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos here, and today and for the next couple of weeks at least we'll look at some games that I played in the Indiana State Chess Championship, which as of this recording was played just a couple of days ago, or finished just a couple of days ago, and which I won. So I'm co-champion, had the better tie breaks though. So this is my round one game against Bernard Parham Jr., and some of you may have heard of him. Well, Indianans, I'm sure, have heard of him, but even those of you outside of it may have heard of him. And the reason is that his dad is the big popularizer of this e4, practically any first move from black, and then queen h5 garbage. So some people are calling this the matrix. All right, I'd prefer to just call it junk, or at least maybe give the Parhams credit for this. Anyway, Parham Sr., who was a master for many years, played this lots and lots, and okay, I don't know that his results with this were any better than they would have been without it, but his son, who's an A player, took it up. I think his son might have been an expert very, very briefly, I'm not sure, but it's typically an A player, and that's who I played in this game. Now, all the Indiana players have known about this because of the Parhams for many years, and one such Indiana player, although I guess now he's a former Indiana player, is Jason Doss. And he was an ICC administrator, and through that became friends with Nakamura. And Nakamura took this up around 2005 and played it a little bit, without especially good results, but it was interesting, and gave him a little extra notoriety. And anyway, he's written an article about this in one of those Secrets of Opening Surprises books that New in Chess puts out. So I think this was a couple of years ago now. Yeah, let me take a look at the copyright date. Yeah, 2007. So anyway, he discusses this. I discussed it on my blog before his article, but when he was still playing this a lot. My blog, by the way, for those of you who don't know, I hope you'll check it out, is chessmind.powerblogs.com. No W's, just you can put the HTTP if you want, and then chessmind.powerblogs.com. Anyway, I'll show you some of my analysis, some of Nakamura's analysis, and some of the games that he played that he doesn't mention in the book, and then also I think an improvement, that may be an important improvement over some of his analysis. And of course, I'll show you my win over Parham itself. Okay, so here if black wants to be a wuss, and actually it's perfectly fine. Okay, so knight c6 is kind of a normal move. Bishop c4. Okay, you don't fall for 4-move checkmate here. You play g6. And we don't fall for the checkmate again. We play knight f6. Okay, bishop g7, d3, d6. Yeah, so I should say knight e2 is fairly important to prevent knight to d4. And then here we don't want to allow bishop to g4 for white, so h3. And okay, this is a playable position. It's certainly nothing special for white. But this is a kind of line that can arise. And Nakamura mentions this as a possible position in his article. However, I much more appreciate the spirit of knight to f6, and for a couple of reasons. Well, let's say at least three reasons. So one reason is that I think it's just a good move in the position, and I like the idea of just seizing the initiative straight away. I mean, I don't mind the idea of developing all of my pieces while white's queen is running around in circles. The second reason why I like it is that I think it's just objectively good. So there's the kind of subjective thing that I like grabbing the initiative here. Objectively, I think it's as strong as anything else, probably. And third, I think it kind of turns the table psychologically, in that white is playing a real, well, how to put this in an appropriate way. White's basically saying, I don't think very much of you, and I can play anything against you. And so black is essentially turning the tables and expressing a similarly scornful attitude towards white's opening and perhaps white's abilities as a chess player and so on. I think you understand what I'm trying to say. So knight f6, I think, takes the right kind of attitude. Now, probably the best move here, and the only principled move for white, is to grab the pawn. Okay, bishop e7, and now white has has a lot of choices here. So let's talk about a couple lines we'll just briefly mention, and then we'll get into the slightly more meaty variations. So I've got 5 moves altogether. Okay, d3 is just a very safe, sane move, protecting the e-pawn so the queen can go scurrying away wherever. So knight c6, queen f4, castles. And I basically think that black is in great shape here. I think he's slightly better, even counting the pawn. So d5 is coming, rook e8 is coming. e5 is not a threat because of things like knight takes e5, followed by bishop to b4 check and rook to e8. So no worries here for black at all. Okay, next line, queen to d4. And this actually I think is a much more interesting idea. And the thought is that we're essentially playing this like a center counter with reversed colors. And okay, black is going to be up a couple of tempi on that, so he's got knight f6 and bishop to e7 in, which white wouldn't have in a center counter. But, okay, black has, of course, given up a pawn, and it's not clear that bishop to e7 is that fantastic. So it enables castling straight away, but the bishop doesn't really do much on e7, and it plugs up the e-file. So this is at least interesting. So I think maybe best is just to castle straight away. And now e5 seems to me to be just too risky. I think black gets a great game with a continuation like this. Okay, and I mean, just all of black's pieces are out. And all right, just to continue the variation a little bit more, white has just a horrible position here. So he's up 2 pawns, but black can win the d pawn at his leisure by just playing queen d7, rook a to d8, and then taking on d3. Both of white's bishops are pretty stupid. White's king is stuck in the center. Also, the a2 pawn is hanging for what it's worth. So this is just at least clearly better and probably winning for black with good play. So after castling, I think white should be a little bit more sane and play knight c3. Okay, knight c6, and now d5. So black really does want to rip the board open if possible. And there are a lot of ways that white can play. When I was doing my analysis of this a long time ago, bishop to b5 seemed like the feistiest choice for white. But I think that in this position, black is at least equal. White's queen is slightly strange on a2, let's say. And although black is a pawn down and white can even take the pawn on b5, the development advantage is significant. Black has better central control. His light-squared bishop is going to be very beautifully placed wherever. He might play d4 and bishop to e6, further and try to embarrass the white queen in some cases, or d4 and bishop to b7. So lots of prospects there, and white's king is still stuck in the center. So not a winning position for black, or close to it, but a very good position and probably a dangerous position for white. So that's queen d4. Okay, line 3 is bishop to e2. And this has 2 points. One is to, of course, foster the kingside development and get his king to safety. But the other idea is that one of black's main ideas, well, I shouldn't say main ideas, but one of black's typical ideas is to play knight c6 and then knight to d4, or sometimes knight to b4. And with the bishop on e2, it can drop back to d1. And that's perhaps slightly more elegant and efficient than playing knight to a3. Okay, be that as it may, knight c6, queen f4, and now d5 leaves white with some unpleasant choices. Okay, there's a game on ICC that Nakamura played that I'll show you. He doesn't mention it, needless to say, in his article, but does offer a couple of better prospects or better choices for white, but he thinks in both cases black is better. So for instance, the simple capture, and here he thinks that black is better. I don't see any reason to disagree with him. Whoops. Line 2 is knight c3, again knight to d4, and now knight e6. And white has a little bit of a tough time defending the e4 pawn. Anyway, because if queen f3, there's knight to g5. If the queen leaves it undefended, then, well, he just takes. And queen e5 is very, very risky. Maybe the queen will just be lost to bishop to d6. And, well, okay, it's not clear. Maybe the queen escapes somehow, but it's very, very close and certainly not appetizing. And then finally, the move that he played in an actual game So it was e5. And black had probably prepared this quite nicely. So knight e4 is very good. If d3, then black wins immediately with bishop to g5. And so Nakamura played knight to f3, but now the pawn goes to g5. White's queen has only one square, queen to e3, now g4. And wherever the knight goes, black is going to have bishop to c5 with a pending catastrophe on f2. So knight to d4, takes. And now here, instead of taking on f2, black really kind of ratcheted things up with queen to h4. And the point is that on g3, bishop takes f2, and then next, black will be able to take on g3, either with the bishop or the knight. If queen takes b7, then queen f2 check, queen g2, and just castling, and black is winning. Yeah, white could have played queen takes a8, but then he's losing the queen because if he takes the second rook, queen h1, and then queen takes f1 is mate. Finally, there's the game choice, which is queen takes d5, but queen f2, and then queen takes g2, and it was time to resign because not only is black threatening mate in 2 with queen takes h1 followed by queen takes f1, he's also threatening various knight discoveries. Well, okay, only one knight discovery because knight c3 is bad. The discovery is with the queen on g2 taking white's queen on d5. So Nakamura resigned here. So I remember at the time that I saw this game, it certainly gave me much more faith in knight f6, or I should say strengthened my faith in knight f6. I had thought of knight f6 years before I even knew who Parham was, and sort of liked it and felt that it was the right approach. But if even Nakamura, who was playing the system and obviously spent time working on it, could lose a game like this in just 14 moves, then I think it told me, okay, this is the way you should play against anybody who plays this junk. Okay, but there are two more moves we need to look at here after bishop to e7. So we've looked at d3, we've looked at queen at d4 with the idea of queen a4, we just looked at bishop to e2 with the idea of dropping the bishop back to d1. Okay, and now there's queen f4. All right, and then here I have an improvement over, I think, Nakamura's analysis. Okay, so castles, e5. He played knight to c3 in a game, another ICC game that I noticed, and this one didn't. Well, okay, I don't remember. I don't know what the conclusion was, but I found a big improvement for black there. So knight c6, knight f3, d5, e5, and I don't recall what happened in the game, but what black should play is knight to h5. The queen's only move here is a4, because if queen e3, d4 wins a piece. So queen a4, d4. Knight e2 was best, bishop c5, d3, bishop g4, queen b5, bishop check here. Okay, and so white has managed to avoid getting his pawn structure destroyed, and is still a pawn up for the moment, but this isn't going to last. And even though white has managed to finish developing and not lose big material, okay, black has regained his pawn and has a clearly better position, better development, everything. Okay, so this is good for black. All right, so after queen f4 castles, instead of knight c3, e5 is better. And now Nakamura gives analysis starting with rook to e8, and okay, he gives 3 moves here, but instead of this, well, okay, after rook e8, I think his main move, or one of his 2 main moves, is knight c3, and here I think white probably does have some advantage. But I think knight to d5 is at least equal for black and probably better. So for instance, queen to e4, knight to b4. And again, white's queen is kind of vulnerable. There are various tricks with d5 and trying to overload it, either get it in trouble on the e-file or make it give up the defense of the c2 pawn. So knight a3 is possibly white's best. It's certainly a reasonable move. d5. Okay, now taking on d6 en passant would be extremely risky, to put it mildly. So queen e3. f6. Again, trying to blast the board open. And now, for instance, takes, and knight e5. And black has regained the material. Obviously a better pawn structure, ahead in development. white is in fact probably just lost here. Now white doesn't have to play this badly, but I think already here even, he's clearly worse. So this, I think, is no solution for white either. So as far as I can tell, objectively speaking, this gambit is perfectly good. All right, well, finally, let's have a look at what Parham did against me. So he played knight to c3. I played knight c6. Okay, and now maybe white should play queen f4, but again, I think black is slightly better. So knight to b4, king d1, castles, a3, knight c6, e5, knight e8. But don't get too confident here. I mean, black next will open the center, and with white's king on d1, black is guaranteed to have at least full compensation. So queen e4 is one line, d6, f4, that's the idea, trying to keep the central files closed. But g6, bishop f5, and black is better here. So the center won't stay closed. All of black's pieces are going to find good squares, and white has difficulties. So to avoid perhaps this knight b4 idea, Parham chose queen g3. Okay, I castled, bishop to e2, and now maybe a little bit better than my move was d5, which is a typical idea. Certainly I thought about it, but I liked the idea of playing knight to d4 first, and I expected bishop to d1, which is what he played. But maybe queen at e3 is a better choice, and perhaps here white does have a small advantage, or let's put it a different way. Maybe black doesn't have completely full compensation for the pawn after this, although certainly does have some compensation. So it's not like I would have to resign or be close to losing here, but d5 isn't the more accurate move. Okay, after bishop to d1, though, I think he has, from here on out, I think I play perfectly or pretty close to perfectly. So there's a couple of moves where, when I checked this later on after looking at it, I checked with the computer, and all of my moves from here on out are Rybka's first choice. Sometimes it'll fluctuate with another move, so depending on how long you let it go, there might be one or two moves where it goes back and forth, but basically I played very cleanly from here on out, so I felt good about this. Okay, well here of course I played d5. Got to rip the center open. This is natural. He played e5, and now where should the knight retreat? So there's a question for you. You can finally be employed and solve a tactical puzzle. Okay, well hopefully you stopped the recording and tried to work on it. If you didn't, you're certainly welcome to do so now. But what I played was knight h5, and this is a very good move. White's queen has only two safe squares, and of course there's bishop takes h5. But neither of the queen's quote-unquote safe squares is really safe in the long term. So for instance, if queen at d3, looks good at first with the double attack, but I just play c5. And of course, if bishop takes h5, this is just bad because of bishop to f5. So probably a better move is knight g to e2, but still, okay, bishop f5, queen e3, takes, and now d4 looks good. And after all of the captures, queen d5, black is at least somewhat better, and maybe close to a lot better. I think white has to play pretty accurately here to not get into big trouble. So white's up a pawn, but black's bishops are more than enough compensation. I mean, you can see white's pieces are all kind of stupid. None of them is well, none of them is individually well placed, and they're not harmonious either. They don't work together to any common end. So queen d3 then is no great solution. If queen to e3, again with the double attack, we still have another trick with bishop to c5. All right, king to f1 is probably forced, sacking the exchange. But okay, white is again clearly worse here and is in serious trouble. So this too is very good for black. All right, well Parham chose bishop takes h5. Probably queen to d3 was the best move, although it's not very appetizing either. So I take, and although you might think that my knight is just going to be in big trouble here, see the thing is, okay, I'm up the exchange. At absolute worst, I should be able to get at least a pawn out of it if I'm going to lose my knight. But his king is stuck in the center. I'm going to play d4. All of my pieces are going to reach good squares. So After thinking about it for a while, I mean, some of the variations were a bit inconclusive. I mean, I didn't see any clear-cut way for him to just win the knight for free or close to for free. But I felt like even if he did, I saw that I had a lot of resources and that I shouldn't be in any trouble even then. Okay, so if, for instance, d3, I play d4 and then queen to d5. And even if I give him the exchange here, I think black is winning here. So I've got, well, I'm up a pawn, and I have, I'm going to win the b pawn, and his king is a target. My king is safe, so this is awful for white. Okay, so after knight takes a1, he chose d4 instead. All right, now here, it's also possible for for black to play king h8, just step out of the way of bishop to h6. And now, okay, if b3 to play bishop b2, we just play bishop f5. That's easy. Black is winning. That's basically the kind of reason why I thought d3 was better. But as I said, even there, black is okay because then I have d4. All right. Anyway, if bishop to d2, with the idea of just trying to scoot the king over maybe to c1, b1, and a1. Now c5, trying to blast things open and making it possible for my queen to come to b6 or to a5 and to help in the fight over there. Black is still clearly better. But okay, instead of this I chose bishop to f5, which I think is perfectly good too. So he played bishop to h6, I retreat, takes, bishop e3, and now I have a couple of good moves. I could play queen to d7 with the idea of queen to f5. And of course that's pretty good, takes over c2 and d3 and squares like that. But I like bishop to h4, since I win the pawn and then my rook gets active. So queen h3, bishop f2. And now here he should probably play knight g to e2. And this is much more resilient than what he did. So here, probably black's best move is to play c5. Again, trying to blast open the center and clear a path for the queen to maybe go to the queen side and like b6. So one possible variation is king to d2, queen to b6, b3. Maybe knight takes b3 can be played, but also cd is good. Knight d4, queen c7. Just giving up the knight, but really trying to pile on here. Okay, so now the idea is to play g4, after which the queen has to give up the defense of the bishop on e3. So takes here, rook e8, and okay, not all of this is forced, but we end up in an endgame where black is winning with his pawns running down the board. So the kingside pawns are just going to cost white too much. Black is winning. But nevertheless, I mean, there's still some work to be done. Even here, not too much, but some work. And to get to here would have entailed some work. So knight g to e2 would have been best. Okay, after bishop takes f2, I'm simply winning. Rook f2, knight g to e2. Here c5 isn't bad, but I played queen to g5, which I like better. Check, here, takes. And now another good tactical moment. So try to figure out what black's move should do. And this is actually a pretty interesting spot. Okay, well, I'll show you first my original intention. And it was to play rook to d8 here. So I realized that I had other good moves in the position, but this is my first idea. And the point was this. Queen takes b7, rook d4. If he plays knight takes d4, of course, queen to d2 is mate. So king e1, queen d2 check, king takes f2, rook f4 check. And now, okay, if he plays king to g1, queen e1 is mate. If he plays queen f3, of course I just take it. Oops. I take, he takes whichever way, king, pawn, doesn't matter, and then queen takes b2. So I was happy with that. And finally, if king to g3, then check, here, takes, and now queen takes e5 with check, and then the knight comes out. And in all of these cases, I should be winning. So I have a queen and pawn for a rook and a knight. I have, I think, very good coordination in the position, and he doesn't. So this was my original plan when I played queen to g5 back here. All right, but when I got to this point, I realized that, okay, if rook to d8, he has h4. And all of a sudden, it's not so clear at all anymore. In fact, black is still a little bit better, but only a little bit better. So, whoops, time for plan B. So my next thought was queen to e3. And, okay, this looks pretty strong. The threat is to play queen to d3. And, okay, well, so for instance, let's say it's black to move. Queen d3 check. Okay, if king to c1, queen c2 is mate. And if king to e1, I think this works. Knight to c2 check, king takes. Queen to e3 check. King f1, rook f1. Yeah. Queen f3, takes. And okay, this is winning. King g1, knight e... Oop, no. Yeah, just checking. Make sure there's no clever computer thing there. Yeah, just knight e3. And there's no way to stop both queen g2 and queen f1 mate. So that's the idea. Queen e4 is, of course, the natural defense. But then I thought, clever me, rook takes e2 and I win. But I looked further, and then I realized, oh, wait, this isn't so clear. Because you can play queen e3, rook e3, and king d2. And after king d2, I thought, oh, I better not do this. So I looked, and I kind of thought about this position for a few seconds, saw that, okay, I have knight c2, but he takes, my rook is still trapped, and I went elsewhere. But in fact, I could have done this, because knight c2, which is right, even though I'm sort of stuck, I am a rook up, and if king takes c2, c5, and I get out. So this would have been winning as well as what I did. So maybe this is even a better choice than the one I made, although it's still some work to be done. But this is good. What I did is good too, though. But this is kind of a neat variation. So first I'm winning, then oh no, maybe he's winning, and then oh, I do win after all. So I hope you stuck with the variation when you were working it out and saw to this point and properly assessed it. So if so, excellent job. There's a third option which I chose, and this is also 100% fine. Rook a to f8. So the threat is simple mate in 2 with rook f1 check, takes, and that's mate. So white really needs to play rook e1 here. And now there are a couple of things that black can do that are pretty good. So one thing is queen to e3, and on queen to e4 just trade and play rook takes g2. This should be winning probably in the long run. I think my intention was to play rook f1 with the idea of swapping and then having the knight come out. Now white can play queen to e4 and keep the knight from coming out, but after c6, black is probably still winning here. So there are a number of things that black could play. So again, queen to e3 instead of rook f1 is also possible, but in all of these cases, black is winning, although it's still with some work to be done. In the game, though, Parham played king to e1, and he did this fairly quickly, although it would be more accurate to say that he did everything in the game very quickly. He spent, until the decision to resign, he spent less than 5 minutes for the whole game, and okay, he spent about a minute on the decision to resign. And this is typical. Parham does this all the time. Just plays. It's the first time I've ever played him, but I've watched him play before, and I mean, he just moves almost instantly in practically all of his games. Why he does this, I don't really know. I mean, we were playing with a time control of 40 moves in 2 hours, so moving like a jackrabbit isn't going to push me over on the clock as of move 1. So it's just very, very strange. I mean, even if he's a very good blitz player, maybe he is. I don't know. I've never seen him play blitz. But even if he is, 2 hours is a lot of time, and it's actually okay if he thinks a little bit on his own time too. So that's one strange tendency of his. Well, okay, so it's two, I guess. One is to play this opening. Third thing is that he practically never resigns. So let's see how this game concluded here. So, of course, I played knight c2, knight e3, knight takes d5. So, thanks lots. Now he plays this, and now I just take and played rook f2. It's mate in 2 more moves. So he could play king d1. I play queen takes e2, king c1, queen c2 is mate. Anyway, so as I said, here he maybe thought for a minute, 45 seconds, some small amount of time, and resigned the game. Well, in the last round, okay, so as I said, usually he doesn't resign at all. He usually plays till mate. In the last round, he came up with a new novelty. So this was a novelty, I suppose, in our game, resigning just before mate. In the last round, he pulled a von Bardleben and simply left the board. Didn't resign, didn't anything. He just left. So not a good way to behave. So unless your opponent is a complete donkey, and probably even then, just resign if you're lost. I mean, especially with this guy. I mean, because it probably meant he probably had at least an hour and 40 minutes or something on the clock when he did this. So the director came after a while and just forfeited Parham in that last round game, rather than making his opponent wait till his flag fell. Anyway, not to pick on him too much. So I haven't heard of other incidents like that in his career. So anyway, a little bit of local flavor there for you. I didn't have any other strange or see any other strange interactions in the tournament, but the next round game was certainly far stranger than this one, and so you'll definitely want to check out that show. So if this seemed kind of routine and basic and straightforward and one-sided, the next game, which again you'll have to wait for next week, is just absolutely remarkable. One of a game I'll remember my whole life. So stick around. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed this one too, and I hope that this gives you some ideas about how to respond to Queen H5. Admittedly, you may never see Queen H5 in your whole life, but if you do, now you're prepared. All right, so thanks a lot. See you next week. Don't forget my blog, chessmind.powerblogs.com. And also, I guess I'll mention, since many people have asked me about this over the couple of years I've been doing shows here, I do give lessons. So if you're curious about that, write me either on through the site or through my blog. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.